Preface. In the world of gods and men, Poseidon stands as both a king and an exile, a ruler of the endless sea, yet forever adrift in the depths of his own soul. This is a story of the god who commands the wild tides, the ceaseless waves, and the boundless oceans, yet cannot quiet the storm within himself. For Poseidon, the sea is both his realm and his solitude, a vast, untamable force that mirrors his own inner unrest. In the quiet hours before dawn, in the moments when the world seems to pause, Poseidon finds himself questioning his place in the cosmos. What is it to rule over such endless beauty and chaos? What is it to be immortal, yet distant, a god among gods, yet alone? These are the questions that haunt him, as he searches for something that no storm can bring: peace. Salt in his veins invites you into the heart of this divine struggle, where the rhythm of the tides becomes a reflection of the god's journey. It is a tale not of grand battles or mythical feats, but of the quiet, often unseen battles that rage within. Poseidon's story is one of yearning, of love that cannot be fully shared, of loneliness that echoes through the vast waters of his domain. As you turn these pages, know that this is not just a story of a god who rules the sea, it is the story of anyone who has ever felt the weight of their own soul, the pull of a deeper longing, and the search for a quiet place of peace amidst the storm. Poseidon, salt in his veins. Chapter 1, The Call of the Tides. The first whispers of the ocean came to Poseidon not as a voice, but as an overwhelming pull, a deep, instinctual connection to something vast and unknowable. It had always been there, from the moment the world had been divided among the three sons of Cronus. He, Poseidon, had drawn the sea by lot, and though the waves had called to him, they had also felt like a prison, their endless movement both a part of him and a reminder of his solitude. The great battle had torn through the heavens and the earth, his father, Cronus, defeated, and the world reshaped. The sky and the heavens were entrusted to Zeus, the underworld given to Hades, and Poseidon was left with the wild, untamable sea. Yet, even with such dominion, the vast expanse of water had never offered him the solace he had hoped for. Instead, it became a constant reminder of what he could control, but could never truly calm. Standing at the edge of the shore, Poseidon gazed out at the endless horizon. The ocean stretched before him, vast and mysterious, an ever-changing expanse of deep blues and greens. The wind, sharp with the scent of salt and brine, tugged at his hair, and the rhythmic crash of the waves echoed in his mind. His heart beat in time with the tides, a constant reminder of the power he commanded. He had claimed the sea by right of the gods, a gift and a burden alike. But what had he gained from it? His brothers ruled the heavens and the underworld, kingdoms both rich with life and order. Yet, Poseidon's domain was boundless, ever-shifting, and wild. The sea could be calm one moment, only to rage the next. It could cradle life within its depths or swallow it whole with a single wave. And Poseidon, the god who held it all in his grasp, was left with the restless rhythm of its endless pull. His mind drifted back to the division of the world, when Zeus had taken the sky with its thunder and lightning, and Hades had claimed the underworld, its shadows and secrets. Poseidon had drawn the lot for the sea, and though it was his by right, it had never felt like home. There was no peace in the water's depths, no stillness in its wild expanse. It called to him like a lover who could never be held, an endless yearning that he could never quench. With each wave that broke upon the shore, Poseidon felt a familiar ache in his chest. He could command the tides, raise storms and whirlpools, summon creatures from the depths. But the sea was more than a realm of control, it was a force of nature, like his own heart, unpredictable, always changing, never still. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow upon the water, Poseidon's gaze softened. In the twilight, the sky and sea merged, becoming one indistinguishable mass of blue. The ocean had no beginning and no end, no boundary to keep it in check. It mirrored the restlessness within him, the never-ending pull between his power and his isolation. He had been given dominion over the seas, but in many ways, the sea had claimed him. The call of the water was like a silent song he had always known but could never quite hear. It beckoned him to the depths, a place where he could lose himself and, perhaps, find peace. But he feared what he might find there. The depths of the ocean were as dark and endless as his own soul, and he was not certain if he could endure what they might reveal. Poseidon turned his gaze to the stars, scattered across the dark sky like distant beacons. The constellations, so far removed from the earth and sea, seemed to watch over him, cold and indifferent. He, too, felt like a star, burning brightly in the night, but forever distant, forever untouchable. Even among the gods, Poseidon felt apart. Zeus, his brother, with his thunder and rain over the heavens, was always surrounded by light and order. Hades, lord of the underworld, had his realm in the shadows, a place of certainty. But Poseidon's realm was nothing like that. The sea was neither light nor dark, it was both and neither. And Poseidon, despite his power, had never quite found a way to reconcile the wildness of his domain with the quietude of his heart. The wind picked up, and Poseidon felt the stirrings of a storm deep within him. His power surged, the urge to command the ocean rising like the tides themselves. But, in this moment, he held himself back. The storm would come, as it always did, but for now, he allowed the quiet to wash over him. With the waves at his feet, Poseidon closed his eyes. The rhythm of the water, the sound of its crash against the shore, the scent of salt in the air, it all reminded him of his eternal connection to this vast, untamable force. He was the god of the sea, but the sea was also a part of him, an endless dance that he could not control. Perhaps that was the lesson: there could be peace in the waves, not through dominance, but through acceptance. And so, Poseidon stood at the water's edge, feeling the weight of his power and his loneliness settle into the very depths of his being. In the stillness, he allowed himself to listen to the waves, not as a ruler, but as a listener. The sea had always called to him, and for the first time, Poseidon allowed himself to hear its quiet song, the soft melody of water and wind. In the space between the crashing waves, Poseidon found a moment of peace, not in his control of the sea, but in his acceptance of it, and of himself. Chapter 2, The Weight of the Deep. The moon, heavy and pale, hung in the sky above, casting its silvery light across the dark waters. Poseidon stood in quiet solitude, the scent of salt thick in the air. His hands, calloused by centuries of ruling the sea, rested at his sides. Though he could command the tides, his heart felt like a great, unmoving depth, filled with unspoken things he could never share with the gods above or the mortals below. His was a world of vast oceans, endless horizons, and silent spaces where nothing could reach him, not even the stars. The sea had always been both a gift and a curse. His dominion over it was a burden that he had never quite come to terms with. In the grand division of the world, the sea had been allotted to him by chance, by the lot that had fallen to him. It was a kingdom he had claimed, but it was one that, over time, had worn thin with emptiness. Poseidon's heart often ached, and he had never been able to understand why. The other gods, so full of light and purpose, had their realms, Zeus with his thunder and bright heavens, Hades with his dark, cool underworld, but Poseidon's realm was boundless, wild, unpredictable. The sea, in all its beauty and power, mirrored his own restless heart, its waves as tumultuous as his thoughts. It was a place of both creation and destruction, where life could flourish or vanish beneath the surface in the blink of an eye. And yet, Poseidon could never silence the noise of it. Never find a stillness that allowed him to rest. He had ruled the sea for eons, his power unquestioned, but the weight of that power was not the relief he had once imagined. The sea was never still, its depths never fully explored, and its creatures were always stirring in ways that even he could not predict. Poseidon could raise a storm, could strike fear into mortal sailors with a single motion of his trident, but none of it calmed the churning storm inside him. In his more solitary moments, he found himself wandering to the farthest reaches of his domain, where the waves fell silent, and only the deep called to him. There, the waters were dark and cool, the depths like an abyss, where he could lose himself in the endless dark. But even there, in the comfort of the deep, he could not escape the weight of the world above. The sky, so far removed, held a presence of its own, distant and cold, like Zeus's throne high above, surrounded by thunderclouds and storms. Poseidon had never felt like he belonged there, and though he was often called upon by the mortals and gods alike, he was never truly seen. He was a ruler of the depths, a figure of the wild unknown, neither fully part of the world of men nor of the heavens. The sounds of the ocean whispered in his ears, soft murmurs, like secrets half forgotten, like promises made and broken. The waves lapped at the shore in a slow rhythm, the sound of their caress mingling with the breeze that swept across the land. Poseidon closed his eyes, letting the gentle pull of the tide sweep over his feet. The ocean was his, yet it was also foreign to him. It was as much a part of him as the blood that flowed through his veins, but it also kept him at arm's length. The sea, in its vastness, was the only companion who could never truly understand him, no matter how much he sought to understand it. For what could the ocean offer him that he had not already experienced? Power? The sea could give him power in abundance, but that power had a price he had long come to accept. Mortals revered him in their stories, feared him in their prayers, but they never truly understood him. Even his brothers, Zeus and Hades, with whom he shared the burdens of divinity, could not share in the weight of the sea's endless pull. They had their realms, their order and structure, while Poseidon's world was ever-changing, always shifting like the tides. He had tried to find companionship among the mortals once, in the quiet hours of the night when the stars reflected on the water's surface like scattered diamonds. They had called to him with their songs, their laughter, their fleeting lives full of love and longing. He had loved them in his own way, but that love had always been like the water itself, deep, vast, but untouchable. The immortality that defined him made him distant from them. He could never share in their fleeting joys or their mortal pains, though he longed to. For all the kingdoms he ruled, there was no place he could call home. Even the creatures of the sea, the ones he summoned with a single thought, could never fill the emptiness inside him. The whales and the dolphins, the ancient sea serpents and schools of fish, they answered his call, they served him, but they were creatures of instinct, not of companionship. And so Poseidon found himself alone, with the endless waves and the endless ache that only the ocean seemed to understand. In this quiet moment, Poseidon allowed himself to feel the weight of his solitude. The stars above, distant and cold, offered no answers. The sea beneath, beautiful and wild, was a part of him but still felt so far beyond his reach. He could control the tides, shape the storms, part the waters with a mere thought, but his heart remained adrift, searching for something it could never find. But in the silence of the night, under the watchful gaze of the moon, Poseidon realized something. Perhaps peace was not something he would find in his power, nor in his command over the sea. Perhaps it could only be found in the acceptance of what he was, wild, untamable, a god whose essence was bound to the water, to the deep, and to the distance that kept him forever apart. He stood for a long time, the ocean's gentle song filling his senses, until the soft rhythm of the waves began to soothe the ache within him. The world would continue to turn, the tides would rise and fall, and Poseidon would continue his reign over the waters. But for now, in the quiet night, he allowed himself to rest. The sea, his endless companion, would always call to him. But for this moment, Poseidon was content simply to listen. Chapter 3, The Quiet Before the Storm. The sea stretched before him, infinite and alive, its surface shimmering under the moon's watchful gaze. Poseidon stood at the edge of the cliffs, gazing into the depths where the light faded into the endless dark. He could feel the sea's pulse in his chest, a rhythm so familiar that it was almost an extension of his own heartbeat. And yet, beneath that pulse, there was a quiet dissonance, a quiet yearning for something else, something beyond the relentless tide. The night air was still, a rare lull in the usual winds. The stars above hung like ancient witnesses, watching the god of the sea with an ageless gaze. Poseidon had seen countless nights like this, where the world seemed suspended between breaths, waiting for something to unfold. Yet, for all his power, he had learned that even the sea could be deceiving in its stillness. Beneath the surface, the currents were ever moving, always churning, just as the depths of his soul never ceased their restless stirring. There were times, in the solitude of his domain, when Poseidon allowed himself to reflect on the fleeting nature of the mortal world. He had watched countless ships sail across his waves, their sails billowing in the wind, their crews' voices carrying across the water. He had seen empires rise and fall, watched as mortal kings and queens sought to conquer his waters, to challenge his reign. They thought themselves masters of fate, but Poseidon knew the truth: they were but fleeting, fragile things, here today and gone tomorrow. The sea did not remember them. The sea remembered only the ebb and flow of time, the endless rhythm of life and death. The thought of the mortals stirred something deep within him, something he had long buried under the weight of his own immortality. They were so full of life, so fleeting, so full of love and laughter, and yet, in their brief moments of existence, they seemed to experience more than he ever had. Their hearts were wide open, full of passion, joy, and sorrow, their bonds to one another fierce and pure. Poseidon had never known such a bond. His immortality had kept him distant from such connections. His heart, like the sea, was vast and unyielding, but it was also lonely, a loneliness that grew heavier with each passing year. He had once tried to seek out the warmth of the mortal world, to feel the connection that they so freely gave to one another. He had walked among them in disguise, had loved them in his own way, but his immortality always separated them from him. He could never be one of them. The fleeting nature of their lives, their passion, their joy, it all felt like something he could never touch, never truly share. Their love was something he could only watch from afar, always distant, always out of reach. The sea called to him then, its waves rising gently against the shore, its song soft and familiar. Poseidon closed his eyes, feeling the pull of the water beneath him, the energy of the ocean swirling around his feet. He was the lord of the sea, yes, but the sea was also a reflection of his heart, wild, untamed, restless. He could command it, control it, but he could never truly calm it. The storms within him mirrored the storms that raged upon the surface of the ocean, never still, never settled. It was a paradox that Poseidon had never quite come to terms with. He was a god, a creature of immense power, and yet his heart ached for the simplicity of the mortal world. The love they shared, the fleeting beauty of their lives, it was something he would never know. He could raise a storm, flood a kingdom, drown a fleet of ships, but he could never drown the emptiness inside him. The sea would always be his domain, but it was also a reminder of the space that existed between him and everything else, between him and the mortal world, between him and his brothers, even between him and the gods themselves. He could feel it now, the pull of the tides, the way the waves shifted beneath him, as though urging him to do something, to act. His trident gleamed in the moonlight, an extension of his will, his power. Yet even in that moment, when the power of the ocean was at his fingertips, Poseidon hesitated. What would it bring him? The storms he created were beautiful in their ferocity, but they left only destruction in their wake. He could unleash the full fury of the ocean, let the winds howl and the waters rise, but it would not bring him peace. It would only leave him with the same gnawing emptiness, the same longing for something he could never have. The quiet of the night stretched on, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Poseidon allowed himself to simply be. The ocean roared in the distance, but its call no longer felt like a demand. It was a song, a lullaby that whispered of the endless cycle of life, death, and rebirth. He had always tried to dominate the sea, to bend it to his will, but now, in this quiet moment, he realized something he had never fully understood. Perhaps the peace he sought was not in controlling the waters, but in flowing with them. Poseidon exhaled slowly, releasing the tension that had built up within him over countless centuries. The storm within him did not need to be fought. It could be accepted, just as the sea could be accepted. He was both the storm and the calm, both the creator and the destroyer. Perhaps, in time, he would learn to be at peace with that. For now, as the night deepened and the stars watched silently, Poseidon stood still, listening to the rhythm of the waves. He was the lord of the sea, but in this moment, he was also something more. He was part of it, wild, restless, and free. Chapter 4, The Tides of Peace. The first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, casting a gentle glow over the sea. Poseidon stood at the edge of a great cliff, his gaze lost in the vast expanse of water before him. The night had been long, filled with the whispers of the wind and the soft call of the waves. The sea had murmured its familiar song, but tonight, it was different. The storm inside him had subsided, and the restless churn of his thoughts had calmed like the waters after a tempest. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Poseidon felt a quiet peace settle into the depths of his being. The sea, once a reminder of his solitude, now felt like an old friend, its vastness no longer a source of isolation, but of connection. He had always been the lord of the waters, but for the first time, he understood that he was also a part of it, just as the waves were a part of him. There was no need to dominate it, no need to control it. The sea had its own rhythm, its own ebb and flow, and it had always been a reflection of his heart. Now, he felt the pull of the tide not as a force to fight against, but as a current to ride, to move with. The sun began to rise, the first rays of light kissing the surface of the water, turning the waves into silver and gold. The sky was painted with soft hues of pink and orange, and Poseidon felt a warmth that was not just from the sun, but from within. For so long, he had been caught in the endless cycle of control, of power, of yearning. But now, in this moment, he realized that peace was not something he had to grasp, but something he could simply allow. He closed his eyes, letting the cool breeze ruffle his hair. The scent of salt in the air, the sound of the water gently lapping against the shore, it was as though the sea had embraced him, and in return, Poseidon allowed himself to be embraced. His heart, once heavy with the weight of loneliness and unspoken longing, felt lighter now. He had sought connection, sought meaning in the mortals, in the gods, in the storms he created, but the true peace, he now understood, had always been within him, waiting for him to acknowledge it. The waves lapped at the rocks below him, as if the sea itself was sighing in contentment. Poseidon's hand, once poised to strike with the force of a tempest, now hovered gently over the water, fingers outstretched. He could feel the sea, not as a ruler, but as a companion, as an extension of his own being. The tide rose and fell, the rhythm of it ancient and constant, like the pulse of life itself. And in that rhythm, Poseidon felt a quiet joy. For the first time, he allowed himself to let go, to release the grip of his power, to stop seeking something he could never find. The sea was vast and wild, yes, but it was also a mirror of his own spirit, both fierce and gentle, capable of great destruction and quiet moments of stillness. He had spent centuries trying to control it, trying to bend it to his will, but now, he saw that the beauty of the sea was in its freedom, its wildness. And that freedom was the same freedom he needed to find within himself. The sun rose higher, its golden rays warming the cold stone beneath his feet. Poseidon turned his face to the sky, the light on his skin feeling like a blessing. The world, with its endless struggles, its shifting tides of fate, had always felt like a puzzle he could never quite solve. But now, he realized that the key to it all was not in his power, but in his acceptance. He was the god of the sea, and the sea was him, but neither one could exist without the other. The storms, the calm, the depth, the surface, they were all part of the same whole. Poseidon stood there, the morning light reflecting off the water, and he finally understood. The emptiness that had once seemed so vast was not something to be feared. It was simply a space to grow, to breathe, to be. The sea would always be his to command, but now, he felt no need to control it. He had spent so long looking for something outside himself, something that could fill the quiet of his heart, but now he saw that peace was not something to find, it was something to become. As the first rays of the sun touched the surface of the water, Poseidon allowed himself to smile, not in triumph, but in quiet understanding. The sea, in all its vastness, was both a reflection of him and a sanctuary. It had always been there, beneath the surface, waiting for him to come to terms with it. And now, with the dawn of a new day, Poseidon stood at peace, not with the sea, but with himself. The waves would rise, the tides would change, and the world would continue its eternal dance of creation and destruction. But for now, in this fleeting moment of stillness, Poseidon allowed himself to rest. The sea, ever wild, would carry him on its currents, but for the first time, Poseidon did not fight it. He simply allowed the water to wash over him, knowing that he, too, was part of its ebb and flow. And in the gentle embrace of the sea, Poseidon found his peace.